Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast. I'm your host, Roxanne, she, her. Today, I'm chatting with my very good friend, Leonie, she, they, about all things voice acting. Leonie, would you like to briefly introduce yourselves for us?
Hello there. Hi. So my name is Leonie Schliesing, for anyone who wants to know. And yeah, I'm a voice actor, and singer. I live in London. I'm originally from Germany. Moved to London in 2013 to go to drama school, and then got stuck, and I'm still here.
So, to kick off, if you
Mm.
can give us a little bit of, I guess, your journey into voice acting. How did you get here?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a winded path. Because I started out. Well, I went to drama school for musical theatre, actually. That was what I originally set out to do. Because, well, I'd always been singing and I was always interested in acting and dancing a little bit, maybe. But musical theatre just kind of seemed like the obvious choice because I always saw myself as a singer first initially. And then did the musical theatre training and then fairly quickly sort of realized that screen acting was also something that I was really interested in. And actually, my acting style I found was maybe a little bit more suited to screen because I maybe don't really do the larger than life musical theatre acting as don't want to say as well, but I don't like it as much as I
Mhm.
um like kind of the truthfulness of screen acting. Um And then I signed with an acting agent who started getting me jobs in theatre and film, and then started getting me voice work just because I speak fluent German and I also speak fluent French. I've lived in France for a little while. And I started getting jobs through my acting agent in voice work and realized that I really enjoyed that part of the industry and I'd never really considered it. And so I started doing little jobs here and there and somehow realized that apparently I was maybe good at it. And also, it paid quite well compared to sort of working in a cafe when I wasn't acting on stage or in a film. Um, and so I kind of started doing a little bit more of it here and there, and I still was seeing it sort of as more of a side hustle for a while until it was probably, I want to say, in 2018, around that time, that I said, actually, you know what? Maybe this is a thing that I should be doing. And that's when I really started investing in it, set up my studio, started taking specific coaching sessions and going to um, master classes and classes specific to voice acting and connecting myself in that industry and then finding an agent who was a specific voice agent, and it kind of all went from there. So I sort of fell into it by accident but then fell in love with it.
And you've done a couple of games now. What was the first one you did?
Oh, the very first one, that was actually quite a while ago. That was a German production. I want to say back in maybe 2017. It was called Realms of Arcania. It's like an RPG, a Steam game, and I played a couple of characters in that, both in German and in English. I voiced them. That was a while ago, um, and then sort of the first bigger or bigger one. I don't really want to dismiss the Realms of Arcania game because it's a really fun was a really fun job and a really fun first job. But then the first job that I got through my agent, let's say, was a mobile game called Gods Mobile, where I voiced a few Celtic gods.
That's so cool. How different is it recording for a game versus, you've done like voiceovers for like books and adverts? How different is it with in the game world?
It's very different. Yeah, there are so many different disciplines in the voiceover world in general. And I, as you say rightly, I don't just do voice acting. I do voiceover for ads and corporates and e-learning and all that kind of non-fictional
Mhm.
voiceover. And it's different because obviously you're becoming a character, and it's the acting is much more important than I guess, what you sound like, or what you well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I also talk to I teach a little bit and kind of have mentored a few people in the past. And I do think that any area of the voice industry kind of is voice acting, because even when I'm voicing a commercial or voicing a corporate, I'm still acting like a character who cares about the
Hmm.
topic,
Yeah.
somebody who's excited about what they're talking about. So it's still fairly similar, but the voice acting in a video game really has a very cinematic character about it, and it's much more about um, conveying an emotion and an inner world through your voice,
Hmm.
rather than just, I guess, rather than just bringing across a message.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a different brief, I guess, a
Mm.
completely different job to do, really.
Yeah.
And speaking of, I guess, characters, this is Game Dev London, so a lot of what you do is kind of developing that character and the voice.
Hmm.
How do you prepare when you get a character, and how much do you know about them before you start bringing them to life?
Yeah, it's really varied. So when I get an audition for a game, um, you sometimes get barely any information about them. It depends on sort of how much confidentiality is around the game, or also just how much work the game does have already done around the character. Sometimes they don't really know exactly what direction they want to go with yet, and they just want a suggestion of where you would take this
Hmm.
character. And sometimes you have like a fully mapped out character with visuals and with voice quality and with a bio, and like what are their goals and motivations, what are their
Wow.
weaknesses, and you get like a 3-page document about the character. So it's really, really yeah, it completely depends on the project how much you get. And then I guess it's up to me to read whatever I have and then pick out the bits that are useful for me to create a voice from there. And obviously, it starts with technical things like an accent. If an accent has been specified, then
Mhm.
obviously um, I'll go for that. If an accent hasn't been specified, then I just sort of see what feels right for the world of the game, for the character, for their backstory. And sometimes I might offer up a couple of options.
Mhm.
If an accent hasn't been specified, I might just do one in my natural accent and then maybe throw in a cheeky German or a cheeky US accent or something, just to kind of give
Mhm.
an option and see what works. Um, and then oftentimes it's it's kind of strange how the vocal quality often sort of just happens when
Mhm.
you feel yourself into the character. If you've been given a good description of what they're like, the voice just sort of follows in a way.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily approach it from, and I know there are voice actors who do it, and I'm, not saying there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I don't necessarily go at it from like a technical standpoint where I say, right, I'm gonna create this voice in a gravelly way, and I'm gonna add a little bit of like nasality to it, and maybe like a side lisp or something. Like, I just
Mhm.
sort of feel myself into the character. And what I often do is that I will read through the bio that I've been given as the character. So, like, as if I was talking in the first person, this is who I am.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then I'll go into reading the audition lines.
And do you prefer, you said there's kind of different ways that you get the kind of brief, so it could be really minimal and you have to build it out yourself, or you get quite a lot. What do you prefer working from?
Mm. I mean, it's great. The more information you get, the more you really understand who this character is and what they feel like. But sometimes the freedom of just kind of doing what I want with it is also quite nice. So I wouldn't say I prefer it one way or the other. I've literally just recorded a character this week for a game, and there was hardly any character description, and I just had fun with her,
Mhm.
and I booked the job. And yeah, there was like 2 lines of who she is, and just like an age range and an accent. And I just brought my personality into it, and clearly that's what hopefully that's what got me the job. And then there's other jobs where I had, yeah, like 2 pages of character descriptions. And I wouldn't say there's one or the other way that I prefer, because they both have pros and cons, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's quite a creative challenge either way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because I don't know. I want to. I don't know if I would say maybe sometimes it can feel restrictive um, to be given too much information because
Mhm.
for me personally, I like that. I'm sure maybe there are other people who say actually I would rather be really free with it, but I personally like having a lot of information that I can draw from. And then if you feel like, oh, actually maybe um they've said that they want this kind of voice quality or they want this kind of accent, but maybe I'm thinking this could work as well. There's nothing to say that you can't send in a second take and say,
Mhm.
actually, how about this? And then they can take it or leave it.
And who are you working with when you're recording? How involved are like the developers? Are there people like who's in the room, I guess, and feeding back as you're recording?
Yeah, so it depends on the game, on the budget, of the scope. The sort of the larger games, you'll always have a voice director who is really invaluable. I was just talking about that yesterday, about this particular one that I've just recorded with a voice director called Adele Cutting, who is so great to work the way that I've just kind of reading it in my brain and then it comes out and then you usually like you record three different takes of the same line and then either the director likes what you've just done or they say, oh, maybe can you try it this way. And sometimes Adele would say, oh, what if we tried this way, and she would like just come out with an idea that was just where I'd be like, oh my God, yes, I love that. And I hadn't even thought of that. Like I would have given her three different variations of this particular line, but then she would come up with a fourth one that was completely not present in my brain. And that's
Mhm.
why like having a voice director is incredible because they just get something out of you that might be in there, but that you didn't know was in there. Um, and so they are mostly on the bigger productions. You usually have a director. Also, indie productions are starting to do it a lot more, which is great.
Mhm.
Um, and then sometimes you will have the actual game dev on the line, who obviously knows exactly what they want, which can be also super useful. And mostly you'll have like the writer or producer on the line as well. Just if there's questions about context or about pronunciation of some kind of like fantastical landscape name, and you're just like, how do we say this? Um, so it's really useful to have them on the line for that as well.
That's awesome.
Um, and then often you have an audio engineer in the room as well who will be doing all the technical bits, which is the case if you go into a studio. If I'm recording from my home studio and I'm just remotely talking to the director or dev, then I'm often the one doing the technical as well.
And when you record, I guess, conversational lines, are you ever with other voice actors or is it always like recorded completely separately?
Yeah, it's mostly completely separately. That's like, I want to say, probably one of the most challenging parts of
Mm.
voice acting is that you don't get to do a scene with another actor. Um, it's all recorded in individual lines. Like for anyone who's ever seen a game script, it's usually an Excel sheet.
Mhm.
Because obviously you have like the narrative trees in a scene where like a scene can go either this way or either that way or that way, and then it all has to come back to this moment. So there's all these different ways of a character to react, for example. So you'll be recording all these different um, responses to a question, for example. There's like three different ways a character can
Yeah.
reply. So you'll be doing the one, and then you'll be doing the next, and then you'll be doing the next, and then you got to still make all of them fit with whatever comes after that. And sometimes, if you're lucky and the other characters' lines have already been recorded, you'll be hearing them and can feed off of them. But if you're the one going first, then it's the director reading in the lines for you, and you'll have to play off of them. Again, if you've got a good director and they're acting with you and giving you
Mhm.
something that you can play off, it's really
Yeah.
great. Um, but also sometimes if you're for a smaller project, for example, I will have just been recording by myself without anyone on the line and just sending the game devs my recordings, and then I've got nobody to play off of, and I just got to do it all by myself.
That must be really strange coming from physical acting
Yeah.
where you're constantly feeding off someone else's energy and reacting and kind of working with their levels of energy and stuff like that to just being sometimes alone in your booth at home.
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, so to do a bit of acting talk. The Meisner approach of acting defines acting as living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, and I would argue that voice acting is the epitome of these imaginary circumstances, because you have nothing that can root you in this character. You're in front of a microphone that you're also not allowed to move around too much from, because obviously it will change the way it sounds, unless you're lucky enough and you have a microphone that's attached to you, which is also sometimes the case, which is great because then you can move around freely. You're looking at a screen with the lines in front of you. You haven't even learned the lines because you haven't been given them in advance. You haven't got an actor in front of you. You haven't got a costume. You haven't got props. So, you got to imagine that you're on a battlefield somewhere wielding an axe while attacking your enemy and screaming bloody murder at them while you're stood in a box. So there's a lot of imagination that comes into play, for sure.
What's the hardest, I guess, type of line? Because you must have some situations where you're just having like grunts, and what does that look like? Is it like a on the screen, and then you're like, how do I do it? What kind of is this going to be?
Yeah, definitely. You get a lot of us and ahs and oohs and ahs and whatever. One of my favorite ones is the death rattle. You often get the line description that's just called death rattle, which is obviously the dying kind of gargling sound that you hear a lot when somebody gets stabbed in the throat, for example. Um, and yeah, you kind of just have to build up a little arsenal of those sounds that you know. Well, actually, again, to plug somebody else, there's a lovely man called Darcy Smith in the US who specializes in vocal combat, which is exactly that, which is, battle chatter and screaming and shouting and dying and being punched in the throat and being punched in the stomach and being set on fire and all of these different sounds that have to sound realistic. He specializes in coaching actors to do that, not just well, but also safely, because it's really, really easy to damage your voice doing those things if you haven't been trained to do it properly. And you just sort of build up a little repertoire of these sounds, and you just know when there's a UGH in your in your script and
You're
it
ready.
says they've been punched in the stomach, you know what that sounds and feels like.
Well, yeah, I didn't even think about that. I've seen like YouTube videos of people breaking down like death scenes and people being stabbed and not reacting well. So I guess
Mm,
you really do need to understand how that is impacting your body, because
yeah,
that's going to be so different on how that comes out in your voice.
yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So you kind of talked a little bit about preparation. You've worked on some games that already have um, a bit of a universe and have been around, Assassin's Creed
Hmm.
being one of them. How
Yeah.
did you prepare for coming up with the voice for that role? And I guess tell us a little bit about the character in that as well.
Yeah, so this is the character that I voiced is Toka in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the DLC, The Siege of Paris. It's a very long title when I have to put that on
It's
my
not
CV.
very snappy.
No. And I, well, when I first got the audition, I had no idea what this was for, because obviously it's all very secretive and code named, and the character had a different name, and it was all, and I was on NDA'd up to my eyebrows. um, but I sort of had an inkling that that's what it might be, because she was described as like a Viking warrior, and I don't even know if maybe in the audition scene she was talking to Eivor as well, which obviously would have been a giveaway, or maybe they changed that name. I'm not sure. I don't remember. It's 3 years ago now. Um, but because I had an idea of that might be it, and I hadn't played Assassin's Creed, I went and watched playthroughs on YouTube to get an idea of the world, of the accents, of the sound and the tone of the game. Um, and because the accent that was described in the casting pack was Norse, which is kind of a non-existent accent
Mm-hmm.
that they say is what they think the Vikings might have sounded like. So I
Yeah.
did a lot of research on that, and what I found was that mostly they say that it's sort of nowadays Icelandic is fairly similar to that. So I watch lots of Björk interviews, and just sort of try to get my tongue around what Björk sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what she sounded like earlier on when she had a stronger accent, because nowadays
Mm-hmm.
she sounds pretty British. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of the video where she takes apart a television. It's like a thing that like circulates the interwebs. She was very young then, and she takes apart this television, and she like looks at the back of it, and she says, "Look, it's like a little model of a city. It's like a little city," and that kind of became my in for the
Your little
accent.
cue.
So whenever I had to voice Toka, because obviously I voiced her over a few different sessions, a few different
Mm-hmm.
days, to get into the accent, I would say it's like a little model of a city, and then I was in the accent, and I also threw in, because it didn't have to be a pure Icelandic sound. I
Yeah,
threw in just a touch of Russian, and that's how I created that accent.
that's awesome. How long did it take to record something like like that role?
So Toka wasn't too long, just because it was the DLC, which is only 10 hours long.
Mhm.
Um, she has a fairly substantial part in the DLC, but I think, if I remember correctly, again, it was a while ago, I think I did 3 days in the studio. So it would have been like 18 hours, maybe.
And did you find it quite hard coming back? I know you said you had your little your cue, but is it hard coming back the next day and being like, right, I need to put Leonie needs to sit back and I need to come into to Tucker now. How does that, is that quite hard?
Um, I guess if you've done enough prep and you really know where the
Mhm.
voice sits, it's fairly easy. And what a good voice director will always do is play you the last few lines you've recorded the day before, and have you kind of voice along to them, and find that again where that sits. And then, yeah, if you've done your homework and you really can feel yourself into the voice quite easily, it's not too hard.
And we've spoken about this before. There's quite a lot of physical similarities between you and your character in Assassin's Creed. Do you think that's ever a kind of influence to someone being booked for a role?
I don't know. Um, I don't think so. I with this particular one, I don't actually know whether she was whether the character artwork was created after or before I
Mhm.
recorded. Because when I originally auditioned, the artwork that I got as a um, reference, what wasn't what she finally looked like. I think
All
that
right.
was just like an image they had taken from Game of Thrones or something, just to
Yeah.
kind of give me an idea
Hmm.
of who this character is. So I don't know whether I don't think they took what I look like into consideration when they made her, but it's funny because a lot of people have pointed out that we actually look a bit alike. Um, Obviously, when it comes to things like performance capture, where the
Hmm.
actual actor is being, well, their features are being captured while a voice acting, then it's a different story. Looking like things like Idris Elba or Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk, their characters
Hmm.
in Cyberpunk look like they
Yeah.
are, like they look. Um, but I don't think when it comes to casting, I wouldn't assume that anyone ever got cast because they look like what the devs intend the character to look like, because they
Sure.
don't often know. If I send in an
Mm.
audition, they just hear my voice. They don't know what I look like unless I
Yeah.
send a CV with it, which is not actually very often the case.
Yeah. Great. Well, I will just say that she was modeled off you because that's much more fun for me.
I mean, it would be fun, yeah, but yeah, I have been wanting to cosplay her for ages. Need to get on
Yeah.
that.
Right. I'm going to ask you a series of quick fire questions now.
Oh, oh
Um,
God.
you don't have to give me quick answers, but let's see. The most fun voice acting job you've had.
Oh God. God, they're all so fun. But I want to say it's probably one that I'm recording at the moment and can't talk about, which is such a
Damn
wanky thing
it.
to say. But I hate that when people are like on Twitter, like, I'm recording this thing and I can't talk about it. But like, the industry is so full of NDAs, and obviously for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's something that I'm working on at the moment, and it's the most fun I've ever had in a booth, but I can't talk about
Oh, maybe we'll have to bring you back and chat about it
it.
when you're
Yes.
allowed to talk about it. That'd be great. Um, what would be your dream opportunity when it comes to characters or just kind of voice acting, voiceovers in general?
Ah, I mean, that would probably be moving away from gaming and into animation,
Great.
something in like a Pixar film, like voicing a cool character in a Pixar animation. That would be the dream, definitely.
That'd be awesome. Have you done any animation at all?
A little bit, not as much as I'd like. I've kind of focused on gaming in the last few years just to kind of really
Mhm,
get a foot in the door, and it's been going really well. So haven't really needed to look anywhere else.
mhm.
But animation is definitely something that is like on the long-term bucket list. Yeah.
Yeah. What has been your toughest, if any, voice that you've recorded with?
Toughest as in most difficult.
Like one that maybe felt most outside of your comfort zone, or a particular voice that just really kind of pushed your skills.
Mm, there is a game that I recorded two characters for last year. The game is not yet released. I'm not entirely sure if I can talk about it, so I'm just not going to mention the name of it. But it's a first person shooter, and so I voiced two of the player choices, and it's like this demon zombie game. So it was really vocally challenging because most of it is screaming your face off and like battling these demons and screaming and shouting, and that really vocally pushed me to the edge,
Yeah.
and also pushed my neighbors to the edge because my neighbor knocked on my door and asked me if I was all right because I'd forgotten to tell them, and I was just in my booth screaming bloody murder, and she had like her phone in her hand ready to call the police. I was like, oh my
Oh
god, I'm
no.
so sorry. Yeah, so at least I know that apparently my calls for help were believable because
Yeah.
she thought I was in trouble.
You need a little sign on your door that's like, keep calm, voice
Yeah.
recording. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd
That's
never
great.
told them that that's what I do for a living, so now they know at least.
I love that. Favorite, you said you're multilingual, obviously.
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite language to record in?
Mm, good question. It's got to be English, really, funnily enough. I find it easier to act in English than in German. Um, I don't know why,
Interesting.
but I think maybe because German is my mother tongue and is so a part of who I am.
Hmm.
Maybe as like by speaking English, I'm already one tiny little step removed from me,
Hmm.
and then it's
That makes
much
sense.
easier to create a character in
Yeah.
that. Um, and then obviously French is also not my mother tongue, but French, just because I haven't lived in France for a while, doesn't come
Hmm.
doesn't roll off my tongue as easily as English does. So yeah, English.
Yeah. Do you play the games after you've recorded them?
I don't. I'm not a gamer. I'm such a fraud. I wish I was. Yeah, I was brought up completely like technology free. My mum was really like against gaming, so we weren't even allowed like a Game Boy. So like whenever I was like around a friend's house and they had like a Nintendo 64, showing my age here, with like Mario Kart, I'd be like all over it. And but then because that was never a thing for me growing up, it was never like a logical thing or like a what do you call it? Like a natural thing for me to be like, oh, I'm gonna get a console. I also
Yeah.
haven't got a TV. Like I haven't had a physical TV in years. I only ever watch everything like on my laptop. So having a console, I would obviously need a TV as well. So yeah, I would really like to get into it a bit more. And I've watched like playthroughs of the
Hmm.
games that I've voiced and stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
really fortunate that someone created like a whole YouTube video of all of Toka's cutscenes, so I was able to watch all of them. Um, but yeah, I've not played any of my characters, which is really bad.
Scandal. So good. Um, are there any voice actors who inspire you?
Mm, yes, definitely. I mean, the first one that comes to mind would be Nancy Cartwright, the voice actress who voices Bart Simpson. Her story is just so cool, and she's just so talented, and obviously that's like the creme de la creme of voice acting, but also in sort of a more local, I guess, area, and like people who I'm a little bit more kind of personally involved with. There are definitely a few people that I kind of admire and who are doing things that I find really cool and that I would love doing. Um, It's so funny. One of them I met for the first time last year, and I was kind of a little bit starstruck because she's got an incredible like social media presence, and has voiced like lots and lots of cool stuff. And I met her and I was like, oh my God, I'm such a fan. And she was like, are you kidding? I'm such a fan. Like, I think you're amazing. And like, I want to
Oh.
be you when I grow up. And I was like, wait, no, I want to be you when I grow up. It was just like horribly cringy, but it was quite funny to me to like meet someone who I was looking up to and finding that she was looking up to me as well. It was weird. But yeah, I have a few people who I find really inspiring.
That's awesome. I guess because you're like you do record a lot on your own, you must have to do a lot of that connection with the industry very virtually. And especially because you did a lot of stuff, during the lockdowns as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, the lockdowns were probably when my career really started taking off.
Mhm.
Um, I don't really know or understand the logic behind that, but yeah, when everything shut down, my career shot through the roof, which was a welcome thing for me.
Yeah.
Also made me feel really guilty because all of my other acting friends were out of work, and I was really fortunate to be working a lot. And yeah, so there is a lot of virtual connection happening across the pond as well, which is really nice. There's like virtual like socials happening and all these kinds of things. But there's also a lot of in-person events around voice acting and voiceover,
Mhm.
uh, because it is can be such a solitary job and can be kind of a little bit lonely when you're just a one person band sort of in your booth and on your computer doing the editing and doing all your
Mhm.
marketing and doing your negotiations with clients and all that, and you're just by yourself the whole time. So I think there's a few people kind of in the industry who have created these communities for people to connect in real life. So there's conferences that people can go to. There's the One Voice conference. There's the Get Your Game On conference, which is a very game centered one, that happens every year in London and in LA. Um, and there's like voiceover socials as well that are happening, just like drinks to go to. So it is nice. There is a huge community kind of
Mhm.
in the voice acting world, which is really supportive and loving and um, helping each other out. It's great.
I love that. That's
Mm.
really sweet. It's really nice. I mean, anyone in a creative industry, I think, needs that around them to be able to kind of stay inspired and
Mm.
stay creative and thinking about new things. And like you said, being able to meet people who you follow and inspire you, um, I think is quite encouraging for you to kind
Mm.
of carry on.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Do you ever mess around with voices just for fun?
Yeah, all the time. Absolutely. Have my whole life. I'm always talking in some weird accent, or like doing like crazy voices. That's been a thing my whole life, and it's actually weird how I've only now come to being a voice actor when it's kind of been in front of me my whole life. And yeah, um, my partner often catches me when we're like watching something, just like on Netflix or whatever, and somebody has like an interesting accent. I'll be like mouthing along to it and trying to like copy it, and then my partner will be looking over at me and be like, "Are you trying to copy the accent again?" It's like, no. Shut up. I do it all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Like bank it in your brain. Like I can use that. I might be able to use
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, we've been watching a lot of Lego Masters Australia recently,
Lego
which
Masters is great.
oh, it's the best, but like Australia specifically is so good. And I very much credit that show now for having helped me perfect my Australian accent because I've been watching it so much and I'm constantly like mouthing along and like imitating the vowel sounds and stuff and just be like, okay, I think I've got the Australian down now.
Accents are great. I think it's, like you said, once you find those little nuggets, the certain way they pronounce a vowel or the way their inflections, once you get those little points, it's quite nice to
Mm,
kind of pull it all together. What accents you really love to
mm,
what's like your go-tos, I guess, apart from your native tongue and in English?
mm. I love a French accent. I
I knew
just,
you was going to say that for some reason. I don't know why.
yeah, I always have. I've always been a massive Francophile. Like as a child, I remember we would drive to Spain on holiday through France,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was like I don't know, like a 10-hour drive all across France. And I was like 6 years old, asking my dad to turn up the radio because I just wanted to listen to the language without understanding a word. I just always really loved the sound. And then as soon as I could at school, I started studying it. And then I went to live in France for a while. And I've just always had a real connection to the language. And I just really, really love the accent. And as like, if I can, if there is like an open brief for a character voice, I'll always throw in a French accent just for shits and giggles.
I'm just throwing this one out there because I
Yeah.
really like this one.
Mm.
I love that. That's great. Do you have any advice for someone that is maybe looking to get into voice acting in any industry, I guess, whether it's animation or gaming?
Yeah. Um, Learn how to act. It's
Okay.
it's really the crux of it. I think there are so many people who get a little bit lost because they think it's all about voices,
Mm-hmm.
when it's really not. Um, Having a cool voice helps. Having an arsenal of fun voices definitely helps. But if you can't
Mm-hmm.
act, if you can't make a somebody believe that what you're saying is what you're actually feeling, you're just
Mm-hmm.
not going to get anywhere. So I would say take some acting classes, like some real in-person acting classes. There are lots around for beginners,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that's probably where I would start. And then once you have a solid acting foundation, then take some voice acting classes. Again, there's lots and lots around. There's some really good tutors and coaches who specify in voice acting. Specify? That's not specialize. That's the word. There you go. Who specialize in voice acting. A lot of casting directors who offer up classes. Randall Ryan, who is a casting director and director from the States, who runs a company called uh, The Voice Director, who runs like regular workouts, and they're very affordable. I know that obviously starting out is always difficult because it
Mm-hmm.
often comes with an investment,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would really recommend just learning your craft first before you start putting yourself out there, because if you start
Mm-hmm.
applying for things and auditioning for things and it's just not very good yet, then somebody might be reluctant to listen to your audition again. So I wouldn't just go for it. I would kind of start learning first, and then when you feel solid and like you know what you're doing, you can then start putting yourself out there and start playing.
Love that. And
Yeah.
you have an agent who I guess connects
Hmm.
you with all of your opportunities.
Mm,
How did you go about finding your agent that you're with now?
yeah, it's actually not all of my opportunities come through my agent. A lot of them, and definitely the bigger ones.
Mm-hmm.
So like Assassin's Creed or other kind of larger games will usually go through agencies. But there's also loads and loads and loads of opportunities out there that are free and like you don't need to be represented to find them. Twitter is a massive
Okay.
uh, source of work for voice actors. A lot of indie games and indie casting directors cast through
Mm,
Twitter.
yeah.
So that just as a side note, it's not the be all and end all to have an agent. But if you then wanted to take the step to try and sign with an agent, you would have to have a good demo, which you can get, again, produced by people who specialize in producing demos. Wouldn't necessarily go and just record your own, because, if you don't really know what you're doing, again, that can just be kind of speaking against you more than for you. And then, find people who have other people on their books whose work you admire. If you see someone who's in a game that you really like, go and find out who their agent is, and then try and spark up a conversation and an email, and don't try and sell yourself. Try and see what you have, what they might want to represent, rather than, hey, please represent me, I need an agent. It's more like, hey, you need me because I have this and this and this on offer, and I'm going to make you some money. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is about for the agent. They want the commission of the books, the jobs that you book. So you have to have something good to offer. So you have to be a good actor, and you have to be a professional.
Final question for me before we wrap up. You mentioned you're working on something at the moment you can't talk about. Is there anything upcoming that you can tell us about?
That's a good question. It's always such a slippery slope, because even if I haven't signed any NDAs, I'm never sure if I'm allowed to say that I am in some things. There are a few games coming out this year that I'm in. One bigger one, and a few kind of indie productions. But I'm not going to say any names just to not get myself in trouble.
Let's not get in trouble. Let's not get the podcast taken down before we've even started.
Exactly, yeah. There's one that has just come out, so I am definitely allowed to talk about that, which is called Gunya Monster.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a Is it Japanese? Is it Korean? Oh god, that's horrible that I don't know that. Let's cut that out. It's like an anime-based fighting game. It's really, really colorful and like hyper and splashy and funny and silly. And I voice one of the characters that you can play with, called Snail. She's this like adorable little thing. It's like, Snail, I want to kill the monsters. And that's on Steam. And you can play that. And I definitely know for a fact that I'm allowed to talk about that.
Okay, good. One's good. And I might try and play that today, because that sounds fun. And well, that concludes today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, Roxanne. Leonie, where could we find you if our listeners want to follow what you're up to and anything that's coming up?
So I'm kind of on all the socials, Twitter and Instagram. My handle is at Leonie Jana S. Jana is Jana. Or
It'll
my
be
website
on the screen at some point.
Yeah, great. Or my website, leoniedoesvoices.com.
Oh, that's cute. I love that name. And you can find me at Zygaming, XAI Gaming. And thank you again so much. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. You can check us out at gamedev.london on most platforms. And we'll see you the same time next week.
Bye.